I rise to give my thanks to the Social Policy and Legal Affairs Committee for their work and for their interim report into homelessness in Australia during this COVID pandemic. The interim report does bring together many of the themes and trends that I'm seeing at a local level in the Blue Mountains and Hawkesbury and my electorate of Macquarie. And I want to reflect on some of those. And one, firstly, the impact on local services in my community, and then secondly, on what we do going forward. The report really replicates the things that I'm hearing, that services are being stretched. There's been an increase in demand, and I think Mission Australia sums it up well, because they note that not only do communities like mine deal with COVID, but the precursor was bushfires, and that created a whole other level of need in the Blue Mountains and the Hawkesbury, and put pressure on rental accommodation. And that's with only 40 homes lost in my wider community. Of course, other areas suffered hundreds and hundreds of housing losses, and those areas in particular will be feeling this. But Mission Australia also noted during the inquiry that there was not just the sudden increase in demand for housing services, but people were seeking assistance for utility bills and food, and that is absolutely what we're seeing. We have fantastic local organisations who are providing assistance, and Winmalee Neighbourhood Centre is now based out of my office, using a meeting room one morning a week on a Wednesday to be able to facilitate some of the distribution of vouchers and assistance to pay utility bills. But every single service has seen an increase in uptake. And I noted the comment by Sacred Heart Mission, who said, what we're seeing is people turning up who are not our typical client. We're seeing people who are on visas or are students, or who, for whatever reason, are not eligible for JobSeeker or JobKeeper, and they've fallen through the gaps and are coming to have meals from our programs. And that is, again, the experience that we're having. When I visited Hawkesbury's Helping Hands in South Windsor, there were international students there who had travelled really long distances. This facility in South Windsor is not on a railway line, it's not on a bus route. These young people who were left bereft of any support by the federal government were so desperate that they travelled huge distances from other parts of Greater Western Sydney to get basics, and they were very modest in what they were taking. And I was standing there with Linda from Hawkesbury Helping Hands saying, take more, you need a bit more to keep you going. And I think services around the electorate are experiencing that, perhaps in different ways. The Salvation Army has told the committee that it's difficult to predict what services, when they're going to peak, but that we perhaps haven't seen the peak yet, and that is very concerning. I want to commend some of the services in my community, and there are many, and I won't get to all of them. But in particular, I noticed the efforts by Central Blue Rotary Club, who noticed a need, identified a need, and collaborated with an existing service, Earth Recovery in Katoomba, to really make a difference there. So well done to Rotarians who are always willing to step up when they see a need. Equally, the Hawkesbury Community Kitchen has had to expand what it does. And of course, as the committee identified, it isn't just additional services. These providers have had to do something different. They've had to have COVID plans. Now, Hawkesbury Community Kitchen has outgrown the space it's in and is desperately looking for another location. In the meantime, though, what it's had to do is all facilities had to close showers and washing services. It's had to manage very small rooms and try and provide social distancing, yet still provide essential meals for people who were homeless or at risk of homelessness. That Windsor-based organisation who have been there for decades really underpin the support in that community. And Linda Drive's Living Room in Richmond is another really necessary service open to local members of the community to pop in have something to eat, but also get food hampers. The Central Villages Anglican Church in Lawson has its food hampers going out every week. These are services that have seen the need, and if they weren't already doing it, they've stepped up to do more. And I think what's been a bit disappointing, and what I've heard from some of these services, is the lack of additional support for them. Yes, there's been funding that's flowed through to the very big people, like the food bank and the very large providers who distribute things to smaller organisations, but a tiny little bit of money for these organisations goes so far. These are volunteer-run organisations. They do a lot with a little, and I think we could have seen a little bit more for these organisations, which would have made a very big difference for them. The second thing that I note is that there was a loss of volunteers, and the committee's interim report has picked this up. Many of the volunteers in my community are older. They were the people considered to be most at risk. And you know, if we're thinking about how we manage the situation going forward and any future pandemics, we do need to think about the reliance of so many local services on volunteers who are doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. And that applies to op shops, it applies to cooking and serving meals, it applies to those who just, in the course of their day, do small things to support those who are homeless in our communities. Deputy Speaker, another key issue in this interim report is around social housing. I think many of us are disappointed not to have seen a commitment from the government to really inject funds into this sector. This report identifies the massive gap there is in social housing. These are not unknown things. Anglicare Australia is quoted as saying ending our affordable housing shortfall would be the most powerful way to tackle the homelessness crisis and boost regional economies. And I can't agree more. The Shadow Minister for Housing, Jason Clare, and I visited with Wentworth Housing, who provides many of the social housing properties in my electorate. We were in Lapston just last week looking at what can be done with upgrade money. For not much more than $10,000 or $20,000 or $25,000, you can transform an really ageing and run-down property and make it somewhere where someone's proud to live in that. Having secure housing changes people's lives, and having decent, secure housing is absolutely transformational. 25% of Australia's social housing actually needs urgent repairs and maintenance. That's about 100,000 homes. It's not an inconceivable number. Some of the homes have mould, leaking roofs, water damage. Others are just run down and falling apart. As I saw timber, I saw kitchens that predate anything that I probably grew up in. There are really old houses that need an update. And the beauty of this, if we're thinking in pandemic context, not just to give people a better chance at a decent life, to give them a chance to get on top of their health issues, to tackle education, to provide their children stability. Aside from those things, which should be enough to make governments want to invest in social housing, but obviously we need to think about economic stimulus. And the repairs on social housing could start almost immediately. There's a backlog. And within a few months you could have new housing construction starting. It's just a no-brainer, in much the same way that the absolute genius of the BER during the GFC was that schools were scattered all over the country, in little towns and small communities. So is social housing. So you could really disperse the stimulus. So I think it's a lost opportunity, and I really welcome our Labor's commitment to provide an immediate $500 million contribution from the Commonwealth were we in government, and form the partnership with the states with the expectation that they'd contribute the same amount in new funding. This would be the real kickstart that many communities need. It would help tradies from plumbers, chippies, sparkies, plasterers, painters, all the people who could do these small jobs and a series of small jobs. And I want to thank David from Wentworth Housing, who took us through one of their properties in Lapston. Stephen McIntyre, the CEO, talked us through the big picture, but David showed us the detail. And that's the sort of detail that can change people's lives. So I thank the committee for their report.